Call to order for the Watertown City Council meeting for February 6th of 2023. Please rise so Councilman Vilhauer can lead us in prayer.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we are so blessed. This community, the people that make it, the staff of the city, we are so blessed for all that we have. And we know it is because of your grace that you provide us with this. We know that that we all have our hidden dark concerns that only you are aware of. And we ask that you always be with us and lead us and guide us through those troubled times, because we all have them, even though we may not want to admit them at times. We ask for a hand of healing on our mayor, that he recovers from his little incident, and that we get him back in full speed here in short order. And now we ask you give this body guidance to make decisions that are pleasing to you and your people. And all God's people said, amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Finance Officer Bob Zine, please call the roll.
Okay. Bueller? Here. Danforth?
Here.
Helene? Paulson? Shetty?
Here.
Tupper?
Here.
Vilhauer?
Here.
Thank you.
Quorum is established. Chair will entertain a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda.
So moved.
Oh, is there any questions on this?
Yes, there is. I would like to suggest that we move item H concerning the Caterpillar scraper to a regular. I know it was budgeted. It came in under budget, but it's a large dollar amount. I would like to have a brief discussion on that. So I'd like to see H move to the regular agenda.
All right. Seeing if there's no other concerns on that, I will move H from the consent agenda, put it at last on the regular agenda. Councilman Danforth?
Thank you, Mayor. Kristen, were you able to identify that by chance?
No, I wasn't, but I do know not in the 2023. But
Okay.
I'm still looking for long term.
Mayor, can I ask a question about one of the items?
Yes, please.
I believe it is item J, where we're requesting a foundation grant. And my question is, I don't recall that we have that topic on our 2023 and even on our long-term capital plan. So my question is what does going out for the grant for a pickleball court, where does that play in our planning and budgeting that we've done?
I'll let our city manager, Mac, answer that question.
Thank you, Mayor. For this grant, it does require a 50-50 match. Dusty, our park director, is out today, so I'm going to muddle through this the best that I can. We anticipate our match to be in kind, like engineering services with the design and whatnot. As it relates to an actual pickleball facility, we did put $700,000 into the budget as a lump sum for implementation or to begin implementation of the master park plan. We are relatively confident that pickleball in some kind of capacity is going to be in the park plan, and Dusty and his crew have done quite a bit of work with the pickleball group. So that's where it stands. There are grant dollars available, but we require council to approve us applying for those grants before we go out. So total cost, we don't have a hard estimate yet, but we do have a local group that has committed to raising a majority of the funds that would be needed for pickleball courts.
Follow.
So, Amanda, so is there a time frame at which, if we were to receive that grant, that we would need to spend those dollars? Is there a time frame associated with that, do you know?
I am assuming there is. I do not know the time frame, though. Typically with those grants, I think it's a 24-month cycle once you get it.
Okay, thank you.
We can verify and let you know for sure, though.
Thank you. So H was moved off of consent, put at the end of the regular agenda. Any further questions on tonight's consent agenda? I did not hear who made the motion and seconded it, so I'll ask for a second. So Okay. And who made the motion? So Vilhauer made the motion now, so who can second it? Bueller? Thank you. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Now is the time for public comments. If anyone is here who would like to address the council on something that is not on tonight's agenda, please do so now. Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public comments section. Chair will entertain a motion to approve tonight's agenda. Motion made by Councilman Paulson, seconded by Councilman Schutte. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item A is a second reading of Ordinance 2228, amending the zoning map of the City of Watertown for a portion of Eastwoods Addition from R2 to R3 Multifamily Residential District. For more information, we'll go to our Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye.
Thank you, Mayor. This action item has been brought forward to the council after postponing action at the previous council meeting where it was on the agenda as second reading. It's been through its first reading, and then prior to that, it went through the Planning Commission and came to the council with a no recommendation for not approving the request. What we have is a petitioner is applying to rezone a portion of land in the northeasterly part of town from R2 to R3 zoning districts and develop that land accordingly within the confines of what's allowed in an R3 zoning district. Without much further discussion or detail needed from me, I'll probably just pull up a map here for reference and then be on standby along with the Community Development Manager Hanton and talk through any questions that the council might have. I believe the applicants in the crowd here tonight, I believe so, and can speak to any questions they may need to address as well.
All right. Thank you very much. Chair will open up a public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to talk in favor of this ordinance? Please come forward and just announce yourself and who you're representing. Is the green light on?
There we go. My name is Dustin Kopman. I'm with Archer Land Company. We met last time. We were here last month. We did have a brief meeting with some of the neighbors a couple Sundays ago. Anyway, we talked through some of their concerns. We have shared a new plan with some of you folks, and I'm not sure if they're able to pull it up.
We are, Brandy will help pull up some of the detailed information that the applicant would like to share here this evening.
We also did share a list of proposed covenants to kind of ensure that this plan gets built to the specs that we've designed it to. So this one here is that the one you received most recently? Yeah. So some minor changes here. We shifted all the buildings slightly east to increase the distance from that far west driveway to the adjacent property, so that we could get some trees in that area as an additional buffer. We thought about moving that playground to the far east side of, or the west side of that last apartment building, but for safety, it seemed like a safer spot for a small playground. So we just moved everything as far as we could to the west, or to the east. And down on the far south end of the property there, that's all left as a grassy area, just to be mowed and upkept with some trees in that area. So in a previous plan, in order to get the density down to that 80 total bedroom units, because that's the same density we could achieve doing R2. So if this applicant were denied, it wouldn't be because of density. In order to get it down to the 80 units, we put garage stalls there. So there's 18 or 20. I can't remember where we ended up. I think it was 20 garage stalls, one garage building there. And then you have a greater distance from the south from the backs of them garages to any south adjacent houses. There's a much greater distance now. So, and yeah, that's kind of where we're at right now. And if you have any questions, let me know.
Thank you. And I'm just going to make an announcement for the TV and for anybody. I'm just going to keep my sunglasses on. My head is working a lot better with the sunglasses on. I have a head injury. Some would say that goes a long way back, but the repercussions of which are being felt right now. So thank you for understanding regarding the sunglasses. Any further proponents? Any further proponents? Thank you, Mr. Kottman. Please stand by for potential questions. Any opponents? You can take your seat, but any opponents?
Hi, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you here tonight. My name is Deb Berner, and I live at 1360 22nd Street Northeast. I've lived in the Eastwoods Addition for 25 years, since 1997. It's a great neighborhood, and that is the reason why I've stayed. And I have had 3 brand new homes here. I feel very invested in this neighborhood. At my current home on 22nd Street, when I look out my living room window or step out onto my deck, I directly see the land we are discussing here tonight. When we purchased this home in 2005, our realtor told us this land would become a park for the neighborhood kids. At that time, we had a 9-year-old daughter, and that was really appealing and one of the main reasons why we chose this home. Now, the plan for the park eventually moved down to the other end of the block, and that was fine. But what is being proposed now is not something I could have ever imagined when we decided to make this our home. I hope the zoning will remain R2, which is more consistent with our already established neighborhood. Thank you again for your time and consideration in this matter.
Thank you. Any further opponents?
Hi, my name is Jessica Lacine, and I live at 1289 Cherry Drive. In 2012, my husband and I set out on a mission to find the perfect lot to build our second home with our 2 children. This would be our forever home, as I told my husband the next place would be Jenkins. After a lot of thinking, we decided on 1289 Cherry Drive to call our home. We were drawn to this side of town because of the friendly family residential area that provided us with a feeling of happiness. When we purchased our lot, we were told by the realtor and the developer of the neighborhood that the area behind us would be Green Parkway. We never once heard any mention of high-density apartment complexes behind us, and if we had, I can tell you, without a doubt, we would have kept searching for another lot. At what point do we as residents of Watertown trust the system? What example would you be setting going against the transitional zoning in Chapter 21 Code for Zoning? Sticking to these rules and coding regulations gives the people of Watertown the comfort and confidence that their property that they have purchased within a growing development will be safe and protected from the possibility of similar rezoning issues. We are here tonight asking you, as elected city council, to promote what is best for us as residents and protect our investments for us as homeowners. We ask you the question, would you want high-density apartment complexes and the potential that an R3 zone could be brought to your backyard? We all want more developers and more residents to come to Watertown to help see it grow, but we need to stick to the rules and the regulations. There is a right fit for every development property, but as my neighbor Mike stated, this one is like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. Just doesn't fit, especially in the area that's already developed with single family residents. As many have stated, there are already R3 zones up in our area, and yes, that is correct. But those also have proper transitional zoning between R1 and R3. If you allow for an R3 zone, our neighborhood will forever be changed. We can debate on how many bedrooms, units, or parking spots one can get in an R3 zone, but we are all trying to protect what brought us to this area, a quiet, friendly neighborhood where everyone is respectful, helpful, and trustworthy. These characteristics are what you have in a single-family residential area. We also have to remember the kind of consequences that can come with an R3 development. A developer can present a certain plan that looks appealing, but at any time, they can change it as long as it falls within the R3 guidelines. How are we as neighbors supposed to trust that the plans won't change, especially with the large variation that can come with this zone? Think about how you would feel in this situation. My husband and I, along with others in this room, have put a lot of work and invested a lot into these houses to make them our homes. Owning your own home is one of the greatest feelings. It can be described in words. It can't be quantified in money. Home ownership is a feeling that makes life's daily grind worth facing. Home ownership is the cornerstone of a strong community. Wendell Berry stated, "A viable neighborhood is a community, and a viable community is made up of neighbors who cherish and protect what they have in common." We appreciate your time, consideration, and thought in this very important decision that will affect all of us in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further opponents?
My name is Leanne Youngin, and I have lived at 1273 Cherry Drive for almost 10 years. My husband and I transplanted from Sioux Falls to move into this community. I would like to thank you guys for allowing us to speak tonight. Tonight's vote is about what's best fit for our neighborhood. It's not about if you like the developer's drawings, and it's not about what kind of covenants could be put in place on this property, because the city cannot hold the developer to any of these. It is about what could potentially be built here if this was rezoned R3. I have been reading over the most recent comprehensive land use plan, which was adopted 2 years after this land was initially zoned R2. This plan is a 288-page document that people within the city spent much time, effort, and money to develop to guide the city, the leaders of this city. On page 1, it states, "The development of a quality community does not occur haphazardly or without insight to plan for expansion. For without a well-prescribed plan for future expansion, community leaders will be left unguided to make decisions which could impact the community's ability to progressively develop." It also states that this plan is a statement of policy which will guide the decisions made by the City Planning Commission, Board of Adjustments, City Council, and various other officials. And that while comprehensive land use plan is not a prescription for specific development uses and forms, the city will continue to control the location and density of categories of land through its continued adherence to the policies and land use maps contained herein, unless there are demonstrable and overriding reasons for not doing so. There are no demonstrable and overriding reasons for not following this plan. It also states that the plan is the official policy document of the Watertown City Council, Watertown Planning Commission, and Watertown Board of Adjustments. The plan provides a consistent statement of the city's plans and policies for future development within the city and in future growth areas. A couple of the urbanized area objectives from page 40 of the plan are to preserve, protect, and promote the character and unique features of urbanized area neighborhoods, and to zone stable neighborhoods to prevent encroachment by incompatible industrial and commercial uses and excessively high-density residential development. This is an existing neighborhood in which many people have invested in and taken pride in and called home for the last 9+ years. It needs to, R2 needs a buffer, just like the land use plan spells out. So I would like to ask you, as city council members, to please follow the comprehensive land use plan, which was created to be the official guide, and to keep this property zoned R2, as that is the best fit for our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other opponent?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, for taking time to hear our side of the story tonight. My name is Mike Odland. I live at 1279 Cherry Drive. I've lived there for about 8 years now, and I got my name right this time, Mike. As Dustin mentioned, last month we received an updated plan from the developers. I can't remember the exact date. It was sometime in January. And literally within a few minutes of receiving that, I reached out to Kellen Bludorn via text message to see if he'd be willing to come to Watertown to talk with our neighborhood in person about this latest plan. You, the council, wanted the two parties to negotiate in good faith, and I wanted to be very clear when we came back before the council tonight that we did just that, and we did. Now, Kellen and Dustin weren't able to make the trip to Watertown, but we did meet with them via a Zoom call. We all met in the community room of the Watertown Police Department that Sunday afternoon. We had about an hour of back and forth dialogue, and it was professional. No voices were raised. There was no animosity. But in the end, I remember telling Kellen and Dustin specifically, I think we'll just agree to disagree how this land should be developed. Now, as noted here on the screen, the latest plan does not include a single component that would be allowed under R2 zoning. And that's not completely surprising since they're requesting R3. However, Councilman Bueller at the last meeting asked if they might be able to include some twin homes along the western border of the property to act as a buffer, and they indicated that might be something that would work. But as you can see in their updated plan, there are 0 twin homes. The 3 that were in the original plan were taken out in favor of a row of 20 garages. Additionally, there would be the 4 high-density apartment buildings that you see on the screen and nearly 100 outdoor parking spaces to accommodate the hundreds of people who live there. Now, as Leanne mentioned, the comprehensive land use plan is a guide to the physical development of the community. It addresses the why now and where to develop various areas of Watertown. And it mentions on the city website that how these various land uses are balanced, and the intensity to which each land use is developed will determine the future character of that neighborhood. And that's really what we're here talking about tonight, the character of the neighborhood. I went back and watched the December 8th Planning Commission meeting, and one of the planning commissioners, Todd Kays, said, and I quote, "The land use plan that was adopted identifies this area for residential development, but it also specifically notes lower residential development in that area." Todd went on to say, in following the confines and the constructs of the land use plan, it's what we should be guiding our principles on. Now, Mayor Holeen mentioned at his State of the City address on December 5th, I was there covering that, he said that Watertown is growing. It's not only growing, but it's growing in all directions. And he's right, Watertown is growing. We're a regional hub and will continue to grow, and that's a good thing. Why do I bring this up? Well, when you're growing in all directions, as the mayor accurately said, that means there will be a lot of development opportunities out there in areas where it is the right fit. I can't tell you exactly where that right fit is, but there will be opportunities. The council is regularly tasked with taking up annexation issues. That will no doubt continue, and it means continued opportunities for projects like this one in areas where it makes sense and in areas that would fit the comprehensive land use plan. Now, we are not obstructionist neighbors. We recognize growth is good. We've never once said we don't want this land developed. It's zoned R2. That is what we want. We want the land to be developed responsibly and correctly. As Jess mentioned, you get only one chance to do this right. Once it's developed, that's how it's going to be for the rest of our lifetimes. It's not going to change. I told my neighbors at the beginning of this process that if we go in with the only argument being, we don't want this in our backyard, we'll lose. Because that's a weak and flimsy argument that is simply not good enough. And we're not here tonight saying, we don't want this in our backyard. We have to give the council valid and compelling reasons to say no to R3, and I think we've done that. And let me spell out a few of those reasons. First of all, the developer, according to the petition filed with City Hall to rezone the property, says they want to provide high-density housing while maintaining the desired characteristics of a single-family residential district. I'm holding a copy of that here, and what I just said is highlighted in orange, that they want to maintain the desired characteristics of a single-family residential district. As you can see here, we've got 4 apartment buildings, a row of 20 garages, nearly 100 outdoor parking spaces for the hundreds of people that live there. I'll ask the council, what in this plan resembles the desired characteristics of single-family residential? Secondly, the Planning Commission has taken up this issue twice, and twice they have said no to R3. It's not the correct fit for this property. I hope the council respects the work that they've done in coming up with that recommendation. Thirdly, Watertown's very own comprehensive land use plan states that this area should be developed but with lower densities. That's in the comprehensive land use plan. Voting for R3 would go against your very own recommendation for this land. And lastly, and maybe most importantly, you as a council are elected to represent your constituents. That's why all of us sitting behind me go to the polls to elect people like you, to work on our behalf for the good of our neighborhoods and the city. Now, we've packed this City Hall chambers 4 times in less than 2 months. And I got to be honest, when we say we've got another meeting that we've got to turn out to, sometimes I think, boy, people are going to get tired of this. They're just going to get burned out and to the point where they don't care anymore. But they keep showing up because this is important for our neighborhood. I'm really, really proud of our neighbors for continuing to show up when we ask them to. Now, we've made it abundantly clear that we want R2 development in this location to round out our neighborhood. That's how it's zoned now. That's how it should remain. We've followed the rules every step of the way. We've been respectful of the process, and we look forward to a positive outcome tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other opponents?
Good evening. My name is Jim Woolen. I live at, my wife and I, Debbie and I, live at 1348 22nd Street Northeast, right across the narrow strip of grass from this. I don't know if there's another map here that would show the zoning or anything, the requests that could be displayed there. But right now there's what's called, it's AG on the map. I assume that it stands for ag. Okay, that's everywhere that we have drainages in town and stuff like that, that's what it's zoned. But that little strip of grass, that little drainage, that is not a barrier between R1 and R3. There needs to be something else in between. There's no buildings on that, on that ag land, it's just wide open space. And in this case, a lot of narrow space. It's just grass and occasionally some water through the low spot. I worked on the police department for 28 years, retired in 2002. For my entire career and for much of everyone that worked there before and everyone since, our slogan, which was basically our mission statement down to a nutshell, was to protect and to serve. We proudly wore that on our uniform, displayed it on our vehicles, and on our building. I submit to you that no matter what your mission statement is, it's the same thing in a nutshell. To protect and to serve. To protect and to serve the residents, the existing residents, not outside non-local people coming in looking to do things, no matter how well intentioned. I think it's the same thing. Your mission is the same as the police department. Use different tools for the same thing. In this, okay, thank you. You see the AG there, that narrow strip of grass that's just wide open space, nothing to block any view, no buildings ever to be there. And you've got an R2 designation on this land in question here tonight. Changing that to R3, as was mentioned before, I guess I don't need to go over that other than to remind you that it has been basically 3 or 4 times it's been said no to make that R3 for good reason. The only thing in the protecting us part of this, the only thing to protect your residents up there in that neck of the woods, all those people that live in all those little lots there that are not AG and R2, the only thing you can do to protect it, the AG does not protect anybody. The only thing that protects us on that map is that number 2, that little number 2. Changing that to a 3, we have to live with the results of that. The results may be totally different than the plan submitted here tonight by the developer. There's nothing we could do about that if it changes and gets worse. We have to think of it worst case scenario. That little number is all we're here to try to save here tonight. Please do. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further opponents? Any further opponents? Chair will close the public hearing, open it up for council action. This is just to start the discussion. It does not necessarily mean you are in favor or against anything. Do I have a motion to approve the ordinance? Motion made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Danforth. Open it up for council discussion. Councilman Tupper.
First off, due respect for everybody that's sitting here. I mean, you guys do have a lot of time and effort and money and invested in your homes. I've heard over the last couple council meetings a lot of things that I don't know if I'd see that were maybe fair statements, because I did a lot of due diligence in the last month, you know, and one of them was value of homes. Everybody feels that the value of their home is going to go down. I've reached out to a number of appraisers, not only in Watertown, but I reached out to appraisers in Yankton, Pierre, Mitchell, Aberdeen, and Huron. I heard back from 3 from out of town. Not a single one describing the situation agrees that it will hurt the value of your home. Actually, when I described the property and that it's been sitting undeveloped for the number of years it has, there was 2 of them that said that should almost increase the value of their homes. 2, when I mentioned, you know, the site here, you know, which I respect a lot of you people saying here, I bought this house, this is what I was told I'm going to see. 2 of the appraisers told me a rule in appraising is if you like your site, buy it. Meaning you should have bought the whole property if you never want to change anything. We're never guaranteed what's going to be across the street from us. As far in all up respect for the realtors that are here, I'm not trying to bash the realtors. If you were promised that was going to be a park across from you, I'm sorry. Nobody has that right to tell you there's going to be a park across from there. It was a comprehensive plan is all it was. I don't know. This is one I'm probably going to struggle with more than anything, and no, I have not made my decision yet. But like I say, I did my due diligence with some of the things that you guys have came and brought to us in good faith. Like you say, I'm an elected official. I'm going to do my due diligence. And that's the answers I'm getting. And I did not take the answers from the local appraisers because I didn't think that was fair. That's why I reached out throughout the state. And I looked at mid-sized cities in the state of South Dakota. That's the answers I got.
Thank you. Chair, just to give a little bit of structure to this discussion, is going to encourage the council to first ask questions and then exhaust the questions, whether that is to anybody here, particularly with the staff, but exhaust the questions first before we start extemporizing upon our personal thoughts. But nothing wrong with you, Councilman Tupper. Chair will also ask our city attorney, to put her on the spot, for a little bit of an explanation regarding the covenants, because there was some discussion with covenants in the testimony, or our public works director, just to explain what can and cannot be considered from a council aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. City Attorney Carrico and I have talked at length with the covenants, and we shared some general information in the previous meetings about what the presence of covenants would mean, or what that looks like, or how they're enforceable or not, as far as the city is concerned. So the applicant does propose to file covenants on this property, and they've shared a draft of those covenants with the staff. They're completely in line with the plan they've proposed to the council, limiting the height of the buildings and things of that nature that would be of most concern of the neighboring properties. Those would get filed with the property, and if and when they did, they would become a legal binding document on that property. The thing that's unique about them is they become legal and binding from a civil standpoint. That if those covenants were not followed, that the property owners within that property and or landowners adjacent to that property could file civil suits or charges against the property owners for not managing their property in accordance with the covenants that are filed against the property. The city, however, the proper city operations do not get involved with administering covenants. There are several neighborhoods in our community that have covenants, and they're managed by either their homeowners associations or the property owners. And we seldom hear about the administration of them. Once in a while we'll get some calls or questions about them, but just wanted that to be clear to the council that we do not administer or police or enforce covenants that are filed on private properties. But they are legally binding documents. With that, I don't know, Lisa, if you had anything else to add, or Mayor, if that clarified any questions you had.
I think that would be fine. Council, I could ask some questions about that for further clarification, but I'll open it up for further questions from the council. Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So I asked this question last time to start the discussion, and I'm going to ask it again of city staff, and then I'm going to have a clarifying statement of why I'm asking it, not because I'm not trying to start anything, but does this violate any condition of our ordinances and or rezone policies?
No, the application before us does not violate any of the standards or criteria that are adopted by ordinance.
Okay, and the reason I asked that, and the reason I wanted to start the discussion last time with that, is because multiple times here tonight we have heard the integrity of the ordinance, and I'm a strong believer in that. I really am, and my past actions have shown that, and past votes have shown that strong-heartedly. I think that we have to follow our ordinances, and they're there for a reason, because they are what guide this community. And we are voted in to uphold those ordinances and the laws around us. And that's where this gets really tricky, is subjectively, I get your guys' feelings, 100%, the opponent's feelings, but objectively, the integrity of the ordinance is what I guess I'm looking at, and if that's a talking point, that's why I asked that question, because to me that's really important, is to uphold the integrity of our ordinances.
Anything further, Councilman? All right. Any further questions, Council? Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Excuse me. Thank you, Mayor. First of all, I want to compliment the demeanor and the manner in which this has been presented before us the several times it's come before the council. So kudos to you for that. I've got a number of questions now, so just bear with me as I ask the questions. I guess the question I want to make sure I understand. the proposal that we're seeing now, 4 units up there, how many total units are we looking at with that? If you want to go up there, Dustin.
So that would be 48 apartment units, 80 total bedrooms.
Okay. How does that compare, and maybe this is a question now for one of our staff, either Heath or Brandy, how does that compare to what the maximum density could be within R2?
I'll defer to our community development manager, Brandy Hanton. I believe she had that number calculated or estimated based on the land size.
I was just going to call on her.
Yes, I had to make my way through the crowd back there, get out of my little desk. So if it remained R2, the single-family attached district, and the previous concept plan that there was for this area, they could have 10 lots, which would allow for 10 or 20 duplexes, and then, or they could go for a conditional use for 4plexes, which would allow for 40 units. And then as far as bedrooms go, I mean, it's really unrestricted.
Okay. Are these going to be rental units or owner occupied units?
Rental units.
They would be rental units. Okay. Brandy, as long as you're sitting there, explain to us, is there any difference in the drainage, runoff, detention relative to water issues between R2 and R3?
No, and Heath could probably speak to it better, but it would be managed the same.
Okay, okay. Not that it's necessarily a factor here, but there are a number of conditional uses that could be allowed under R2. Do you want to, fill us in a little bit about what some of those conditional uses could be within an R2 area?
Yes, so off the top of my head, so you can have anything that's a conditional use in the R1 single-family residential district, which that is a list, and actually I could just pull that up. But then for the R2, you can have, and it's probably not going to let me do it that way. Yeah, because I didn't put WW. Okay, so but in the R2, you can have by conditional use the 4plex. You can do a 3, and that's the, if you're look for a higher density, that would be the conditional use. That's the maximum density that they can go with. Would be a 3 or a 4plex.
But isn't there also allowance for retail establishments, including funeral homes, for example, that could be allowed under a conditional use in an R2? As well as an R3, obviously, but also it could be allowed in an R2.
Yes.
Okay, I just want to throw that out there. How do these plans compare to what came before us back in 2015? That's referenced a number of times. How do these plans, anybody, whether it's the opponents or staff, how do these plans compare? Because that was turned down unanimously when that came before us in 2015.
So, and if Heath's okay with me answering that. So, as far as what was proposed, I know that, it was a different developer, and I think proposing a higher density, although you can't really restrict, like we've discussed with the R3 district, it is in ordinance as is. And then what these developers are proposing is doing the covenants, which then, as we've discussed, the city does not regulate. But, when it was proposed to be R3 and then ended up going R2, in the master plan for this development, this area was shown to be zoned C2, local commercial district. So I'm not sure, at that time, why they went R2 versus going to C2, which is what the master plan showed for the area.
Okay, so that was actually at one point designated for commercial development then, is what I'm hearing you say, Brandy.
Yep.
Okay. Again, maybe not necessarily germane to the conversation, but last question anyway. Okay, what does our comprehensive land use plan say? Granted, it's still county land, about the land immediately to the north of 14th Avenue. Do we address that at all?
The land north,
Yeah. I know it's not annexed in yet, but
and let me, okay, I'm gonna keep this. I can pull that up. Okay, so, and there are multiple maps here. Dang it. So this is residential development site is showing in that yellow to the north of 14th. But then, so this is the future land use map, but then there are other maps as well that I'll get to here from the, actually, I think I'm up here, sorry.
so is it safe to say it's residential, but not necessarily R2 or R3 plans? Is that a fair statement?
Some of these maps do get more specific, if I can. Okay, so, gosh dang. I mean, okay, here we go. So then, and all of these are future land use maps. This is saying the mixed land use, so it's not earmarking that area to the north of 14th on this map. And then same with this map. And at the Plan Commission meeting, that's what I said with our comprehensive land use plan, that it's very inconsistent. Because this first map that I had pulled up is technically the future land use map. And then all the areas that are already zoned in city limits are just shown as redevelopment areas. But then they do get into the more specifics of, residential. And as it was referenced before too, then this map here shows that it's low density residential, and that's how it does exist. But it still is saying future land use of specific land use. So
Okay.
a lot of different maps.
Okay. May I continue, Mayor? Just procedurally, what, if anything, comes before us as a council as the developer continues forward with their plans if this rezoning were approved?
And Heath, are you okay with me answering?
So it would follow after the rezone is completed, follow the development process of any necessary platting of the land. And I couldn't tell you, in this case, this does require a plat, Brandy, or not necessarily? Will?
Yes,
Okay.
this area would.
So the plat would be one document, because that would not be an administrative plat, correct, Brandy? That would have to go to the Planning Commission and City Council?
For the infrastructure improvements, but this half street already exists, but that would be, we'd have to determine if there would need to be a development agreement along with this plat.
So there's certain criteria depending on the design of the project, whether a formal platting process has to occur. There's language in the ordinance that allows the city engineer to execute an administrative plat, but that's only under the circumstance of no public infrastructure, no public right-of-way, and things like that. So I'm guessing this will require a conventional plat that would have to come forward to the council.
Okay. As I understand it, we can ban parking on 14th Avenue if there's any concern about parking along 14th Avenue.
Yeah, I would say we have the council has the authority to restrict and prohibit parking really anywhere within the city limits. And if we have reason to believe that we needed to post 14th in relation to a development, we could certainly look at that.
Okay. And I think I asked a question last time of you, Heath. Whatever streets would be involved in this, there would be no concerns, there would be no requirements or responsibilities of the city as far as maintaining anything as far as snow removal or garbage services or anything of that nature in the development?
The development would be served by our city garbage collection service.
Okay.
And as far as the street configuration goes, I believe their rendition and their plan shows those to be private streets. The case where the city would be involved, of course, is if they built them to city standards and wanted us to take them over and platted them in right of way, then of course they'd become ours for ownership and maintenance.
Okay. Thank you. That's all for now.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councilman Tupper.
Ms. Hatton, can you bring up the original zoning map that we had up earlier? Yeah, that one there. Where there's R2, just to the east of the proposal, there's R3 and R2. Was that in the original plan for R2 and R3? The comprehensive land use plan?
Oh, okay.
Or were those brought in afterwards? Other words, was there rezoning on those two plots?
And so what I had was the original master plan pulled up here, but then those were a different subdivision. So I can't say. I can.
So is there any way of telling whether or not those were brought in under a rezone? I mean, was there a rezone for an R2 and an R3 there?
Or if they were following their original concept plan.
Yep.
Let me confirm.
I thought I sent all my questions ahead that I were going to ask, but this one I didn't think of until now, so.
And actually at that time.
Mayor, if I may, when she's looking that up.
Yes.
Does anybody in the audience remember, was that ever brought forward as a rezone on that R2 and R3?
That was developed actually after we moved in. When we moved in, it was originally going to be 27th Street going, or 25th, I believe it was, going all the way through to 14th. All of that was developed afterwards. But it was not ever, none of us were ever notified of a variance or a rezone, because at the time, all they needed to do was notify the adjacent landowners, which was the city. So if it was rezoned, it was not a part that we were aware of.
Would that be correct that they would not have needed to be notified?
So we would have notified, and we have been for many years, notifying adjacent landowners within 250 feet of the property. So depending on this boundary, where the proximity to the neighbors would be.
That was after 2015, when we weren't notified about the first rezoning and annexation. Because we were not notified the first
Actually,
time.
yeah, you should just have a microphone if you're going to be talking
Okay.
this much. And Councilman Tupper, are you sure this is who you would like to address your questions to? I'm not saying that you're not qualified or anything, but.
No, I'm fine with anybody from the audience. Why Brandy's looking that up.
I'm just familiar with it because we dealt with this before. So this was developed after 2015. At the time, none of these were in the building. But when this land was originally going to be annexed into the city and rezoned, the city was not notifying people within 250 feet because we were not notified that time. We only know because Mike attends the city council meetings. So that 250 feet has been since 2015. But prior to that, that was not a city rule.
Councilman
I
Tupper?
could do some research
But,
on that.
Okay, back to that question, I guess. And you say Mike covers that. Mike would have known because it takes more than one reading.
Well, and
Correct.
here I have the list of the
Okay.
people that received the adjacent landowner list.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't want to make it into a argument, put it that way.
Randy, are you talking about the existing R3?
The existing R2 and R3, yes.
Okay, the existing R3, I don't know. But the first time that the R2 was turned down as R3, that was when then Mayor Thorson was in office and the mayor, and we didn't get notified. I just remember it was the tail end of a city council meeting, and it was either old business or new business, and we had literally lived in our house for maybe a month, and Mayor Thorson started talking about Eastwoods, which meant nothing to me. And then he brought it up on the map, and I kept leaning forward in my chair going, that's right in our backyard. So that was the R2 that we're talking about tonight. That was first proposed for R3 and turned down by the Planning Commission and the City Council in 2015. The R3 that is east of there, where those buildings already exist, we've been in our house, when were those built, Leanne? Do you remember?
2016,
Yeah,
2017.
and we weren't notified, but if it's within 250 feet, that might be outside the boundaries of where I live, so I probably wouldn't have been notified on that one.
Mayor,
see that-
in all fairness, I see
Yeah,
there's a
I see
gentleman.
that there's an answer in the back as well, so.
And I'm done with this
Yeah.
after.
And I just, I have allowed some leeway on this simply because I know that Councilman Tupper's questions are not alone, because I had them as well, but I want to caution the council that history can only take us so far. In front of us right now is a question as to what to do with the land now, not what would have been done or should have been done on the land in the past. So just want to caution the council, history can only take us so far, but it can help us understand how we got here.
So thank you, Kyle Lallam. I'm with Haugen Nelson Realty. Councilman Tupper, you were referencing the land to the east. If Brandy could pull that back up right there, that R3 and R2. That development was annexed into the city in 2013. And construction on the R3 units, the 3 units directly contiguous with this property, started their building permit process in 2014, as well as the lots 4 and 5, which are the right off 14th Avenue. Those also pulled building permit in 2014. So this lot 4 and lot 1 and 2 all had improvements going in 2014 because that development was annexed in 2013.
Thank you. Any further questions? Councilman Bueller?
Thanks, Mayor. Got some questions and some comments. You know, I want to make sure that we have exhausted an opportunity we discussed last time. And Mr. Cotman, would you mind? Could I visit with you a little bit on that? And Mr. Odlin, perhaps you could come up and take the microphone as well. I
am going to caution, we're not trying to be the intermediary between an agreement. I will allow questions, but yeah.
All I want to do is make sure we've exhausted this opportunity, because we discussed it at the last meeting, and that was putting duplexes on the west end of that property. And then you would drop to 3 apartment complexes, and then you could continue with your duplexes to the south.
Mm-hmm.
That is not a desirable plan for you, is that correct?
That is correct. We discussed that, and we ultimately decided that if we could shift the properties over, which we ended up doing on our proposed plan, to get them further away from that far west edge, have more of a buffer from the street to the property line, and then also a little bit more of a buffer from the street to the furthest west apartment building. But there, with how a duplex would be arranged with the backyard setback, and then the depth of the building, and then the front yard setback, and a street coming through, it just did not leave enough room to the east to do what we want to do with getting enough units there, without putting one of the big buildings all the way down to the far south end of the property, which, as a balance, it seemed like it would be better to hold the buildings further north on the property to keep them further away from the most adjacent neighbors.
Okay, so that's not going to work for you folks.
Correct. It wouldn't work for us to put duplexes along the...
I just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
Because to me that seemed like it would solve the plan. And Mike, the reason I wanted you up there was because if he thought that was going to work, then I wanted to see how you felt about that.
All right.
May I make a couple comments, Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. You know, we talk about comprehensive land use plan. We talk about that a lot. And I've been involved with developing probably 3 or 4 of those over the years. And they're kind of a dynamic plan. I mean, it's not a rigid plan. It's not something we put together and this is gospel and this is where this is going to go. They change all the time. As developments come into play, We make changes to those all the time. It's sort of a wish list. This is where we'd like to see this kind of development, we'd like to see that. But it's not written in stone that this is how we develop. There are communities that do that, but we have not done it that way in the past. I do have a question, if I might, Mayor, for Councilman Paulson, and that's in regards to the ordinance. And you may be 100% right. I just am not clear on what you're talking about when you say that you're upholding the ordinance of the community. Can you explain more in depth what you mean by that?
Councilman Paulson, do you wish to answer that question?
I can, yeah. Councilman Bueller, I was just referring to the requirements set forth in the ordinance, as in, if you're rezoning, you have to meet these requirements, including a buffer. It's not an ideal buffer, but it technically meets the requirements of the buffer requirement, adjacent to an R1. And everything else set forth in that, and Heath might be able to help me out just off the top of my head because I don't have them pulled up. But that's why I ask, is because there's set criteria for a rezone to even come forward, even to the Plan Commission. And sometimes you have to ask for an adjustment. That's why we have a Board of Adjustment. But this meets all those requirements without any adjustments whatsoever.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. But from my years in planning, it's always been a transition from R1 to R2 and then to R3. What they're asking for is R1 to R3. Now, I know we got some ag buffer there, but still, that's the question. Now, to me, that does not follow standard planning procedures. It doesn't. And as far as I'm concerned, it really never has. And there was some discussion tonight too about conditional use for different zoning opportunities. What conditional uses, everybody, just so everybody understands, those are things that you can ask for a specific zoning opportunity, because there's specific uses that are listed you can absolutely do in those locations, but the others are conditional. It has to go to the Planning Commission. I'm pretty sure it has to come to us too, after they get done with it, doesn't it? Or doesn't it? Okay, I couldn't remember for sure on that part. But it's still, they have to, the Board of Adjustments, which is a Planning Commission, would have to make approval of that conditional use. So it's not like it's automatic. And I want everybody to be clear on that part of that. But anyway, those are my questions, some concerns I had, just to clarify. Thank you.
For clarification, I will go to City Manager Mack regarding notification procedure.
Thank you, Mayor. I did just want to share for those that are interested, state statute requires notification to immediately adjacent landowners for any rezoning. The city goes above and beyond with the 250 feet. So there were some comments made that we weren't notifying people. We were following state statute and decided to increase our own efforts after the 2015 conversations.
Thank you. Chair will now open it up for comments and questions. Councilman Danforth.
Thank you, Mayor. I, like Bruce, have spent a lot of time on the Plan Commission and Board of Adjustments over the years. And one of the things that I've always found is rezoning requests in a otherwise developed area has always been problematic unless you're going up, meaning from R2 to R1, whatever. If it gets deemed better, I'm not sure if that's up or down, whatever you want to call that, but to go from an R2 to an R3 in a relatively developed area has always been problematic. More times than not, there's opposition to it, and more times than not, this is what we see. And then, as Bruce mentioned, the conditional uses, those are very difficult to achieve in most cases in an already developed area. We've had a number of issues in the past that on the Plan Commission, Board of Adjustments that have come to us, and maybe in theory they look good, but in actuality they weren't acceptable, and those were conditional uses. So once you start getting a higher level of development around you, the rezoning R2 to R3 as an example, or conditional uses within a zoning just becomes more and more problematic. And this request for me, is it got inherent issues that I have concerns with. One is all the people that are out here that I represent in the ward, and I have to take their concerns seriously. But as I had met with some of them, and I've talked to Mike a number of times, if I think you're wrong, I'm going to tell you you're wrong. And I'm going to try to tell you what the procedure is. That's really what my job is, to try to educate. If I think you're wrong, I'm going to tell you you're wrong. If we were sitting here and there was all these lots around this that hadn't been built upon, I'd tell you you're wrong in your opposition to this. Today, with what we see up there, with almost no land left to develop, I fully support where you're at, and I understand that. And I think that we as a city, I think somebody had said it, that there's a point at which we just have to meet our commitments, and that commitment is in the zoning that we have. Another problem that I have is, no matter what happens, and this isn't a trust issue with any one of you and Dale and yourself, this isn't a trust issue, but the fact of the matter is, if we rezone to R3, there's absolutely nothing that says you got to do what you're planning to do. That bothers me, that we don't have a mechanism that supports our decision to go to an R3. See, as had been mentioned, covenants doesn't do me any good in trying to make this decision. The last thing I just want to make a comment on, and then I think you can tell where I'm going with this. In previous meetings, don't know which ones, it was said that that denying this is really telling developers that the city of Watertown is in not supportive development. That cannot be any farther from the truth than reality. These people and staff, our community has always been supportive of good, effective, and reasonable development. So, not all requests are going to be allowed and approved. That's really what the bottom line is. And if this was pre-development up there, meaning all those homes, I think this would be a great deal. Where it's at today, I can't support it. And as much as I would like to, I can't. So that's where my position is. I think we need to, at some point, and I think that point in this particular instance, we need to live up to decisions that have been made in the past. And I think that the people that have made their investments, they need to count on us. And that's where I'm at.
Councilman Shetty.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Well, I too want to comment. I don't have any questions, but just listening and for the last month been listening and paying attention and being very open to this process, as far as I don't want to be one-sided in my own thought as far as which way I think it should go. So I appreciate I mentioned that last meeting, that just to see if we can work together, developer and neighborhoods. Because, I mean, when we make decisions here as a council, it isn't just for the homeowners, it's for the business owners, for the religious community, for the educational community, industrial, I mean, it's for all. And so it's not just, it'd be too one-sided if it was just for one particular part of the community. So developers are a big part of a community as well as the neighborhoods and homeowners. So I do appreciate that as well. This vision here that we're looking at, being from R2 to R3 is what we're deciding here as a council. Not really based off the vision, however, on the vision itself, being right next to an R3, which is a smaller R3 because it doesn't hit the maximum requirements to the east. It doesn't hit 55 feet. So that is a smaller type of R3 development there. This development would fit as far as to the east, property to the east, as proposed. And I like what the developers are showing and what they're doing here. That said, though, the decision, though, for me and for all of us is, okay, is this property, though, an R3 or not? Does it fit the R3 to the max? And I guess, and that's what I'm working through myself personally. And that's what I can tell all of us are working through that process. And so that's just, I do appreciate the process that we're working together and meeting and behind the scenes. And this is how we should function as a city. You know, of course, somebody's not going to like a decision tonight, but I do like the fact that we're trying to work through this together. And again, the final decision for me personally, and I'm sure for all of us, is does it fit the R3 parameters or not? You know, that neighborhood for having an R3 there, and that's what I'm listening to myself. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councilman Bueller.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to clarify kind of where my head's at on this whole thing. It hasn't changed a lot from discussions we've had in the past. I was really hoping that there could be some sort of a compromise that could have come about and that didn't happen, to at least to my understanding. You know, one thing I have to say, you know, in this position, I think we really have to be careful about which direction we go. And when you've got a whole neighborhood that's coming out against this, that doesn't want this for one reason or another, that means a lot to me. I mean, we're a small town. This is a subjective issue. I think it's something we have to really consider. And we've had these things happen in the past where we really had to look, when you've got this kind of response, you have to look at that and they have to take that seriously. You know, that to me is a big thing. You know, the Planning Commission has disapproved this. This is the third time this has been brought to the table, and the other 2 times it was disapproved. You know, I think we have to take that into consideration as well. I do want to thank the developer. I think you guys probably built beautiful properties. I think you had a good plan. Appreciate the effort, the work that you've put into this to get to where it is today. So don't give up on us. You know, hopefully we can find a location for you that you can develop. And I also want to thank all the neighbors, all the folks that turned out tonight to take time out of their evening away from their kids and dinner and everything else. 3-4 times we've had these folks here. That also shows a great deal of support by the neighborhoods to maintain the original plan, which was what we typically do in development, in planning, is we go from R1 to R2 to R3. That's how we do it. So in this case, that I cannot support the change to R3 tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlemen, I think we're done asking questions for now. You can return to your seats. Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I would echo Councilman Bueller's comment about hoping that we could reach a compromise before we came to this meeting tonight, because this has been a struggle for all of us. But I guess I want to remind our colleagues that at the January 3rd meeting, when this discussion came before us that later in that meeting we did approve an R3 designation right across the street from R1. I just want to remind our colleague that we're not necessarily setting a precedent here if we were to approve this. So I just want to remind my colleagues that we have recently done that, and we've done it before in the past. The fact that land has sat there vacant the way it has over the years, that's telling me that something's not right as far as the zoning to make it worthwhile for a developer to do something with it. I have to commend the developer as far as bringing the plans forward and trying to reach a compromise that works. If I were you in the neighborhood and I lived there, I'd probably feel the exact same way. I feel like, however, I need to consider the overall, what it means to overall community, not just a specific neighborhood. In working with developers, I keep hearing time and time again that there be more development in the community, but there's always a scarcity of land to be developed. And we have a need for more development for residential, and this would help satisfy that need. Now, it sounds like I'm totally in favor of this. I got to tell you, I'm still up in the air as far as how I'll vote on this, but I do see some legitimate reasons why this rezoning request does make sense.
Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I do want to thank Councilman Vilhauer for bringing up the previous rezone that we just approved last meeting. It actually was a little bit, it was almost the exact same request as this, except it was immediately adjacent with absolutely no buffer, whether that be ag or any other thing. That's where I kind of disagree, and I made those comments last meeting as well. Again, the integrity of the ordinance means something. We have ordinances and policies for a reason. We rely on our staff to help with those and to make the correct decisions, and then bring what is presented to us to make the final decision. And that's obviously where we're at right now. And staff is telling us that this meets the ordinance requirements. And so that's where my decision's gonna lie, is that I'm following the integrity of the ordinance, that I'm told that it follows 100%. And honestly, if this fails tonight, we will see a change in the development community. We have struggled to get outside developers into this town. And I'm not saying that should weigh on our decision tonight, but it will not only affect outside development or developers coming back to this community, it's also going to affect how you see zoning brought forth in the developments. So you will start seeing a lot more R3s brought forward, and then it will be rezoned to R2 and R1 after that. And so everyone else looking for a house or a R1 family, single family home, they're going to struggle going forward if this fails, because yours just happens to be in the right time, where we just denied one of these just a few months ago. Almost the exact same request also. And the development community is screaming because of it. So I guess that's where my comments lie.
Any further comments? I guess I better say something before I vote, just so that it's not a complete surprise. I want to thank all of the council. I want to thank everyone for talking about this for so long. I want to thank especially the developer and for coming forward with a different plan. We cannot vote on covenants, so that's out of the window. I very much like what Councilman Vilhauer had to say about that piece of land, that it's set with a big dirt pile on it for quite some time, so obviously something is wrong with it. I will say that there has been things wrong in that area of town for a while. I mean, we had the Cherry Creek issue that hung over this council for a couple of years. We've had the 14th Avenue Road not being wide enough and purposely not being wide enough. There have been issues that can go way back, but we're not going to look into the past to assign blame. We can only look at what it is tonight. I guess in my mind, I was trying to come up with a correlation, and forgive me for if this doesn't resonate with anyone, but it did with my head. I liken it to a game of football in the NFL. If there's a call, let's say if a Minnesota Vikings are in the Super Bowl and they've got first and goal at the 1, hey, as long as I'm going to go fantasy, let's go all the way. It's first and goal at the 1, and they hand it off, and the running back gets so close that one ref called it not a touchdown, one ref thought it was. In the end, the referees on the field call it no touchdown. And the call on the field, in order to be overturned, has to be clear and incontrovertible. That means that there has to be absolute proof that the previous call was not the right one. The call on the field here has been R2. For R2 to be overturned, in my mind, there has to be clear and incontrovertible evidence that R3 is the absolute best way to go. And I cannot say that. At best, in my head, I'm maybe 52% against this. Probably not even much more than that. And I think that most of the council would probably agree with me. I doubt that anyone, maybe one of us, is more than 60-40 in favor or against this. And that just goes to show that there's a lot of confusion about this call. With that said, as much as I might not like the call on the field, and I don't, I'm going to stick with it because that's also our procedure. Just as much as we want to stick by our ordinance, we want to stick by our procedure. And I will call on that. I'm not happy with it. With that, if there's no further comments, I will ask our finance officer to call the roll. So in case you're wondering, aye is to change it to R3. No is to keep it at R2.
Okay. Bueller.
No.
Danforth.
No.
Pauline.
No.
Paulson. Yes. Shetty.
No.
Tupper,
Yes.
Vilhauer. Motion fails.
Motion fails. Thank you very much. I'll give you a time to leave if you would like to. That kind of gave me some juice. All right, Chair will move on to the next 4 items. B, C, D, and E are all very similar. We will take independent votes on all of them, but we will go to our Finance Officer, Kristen Bobzien, to testify on all 4 at one time.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Yes, before the council tonight, I'll kind of go over B and C first. They relate to each other. So B and C are a transfer of a retail on-off. Both of them are going to be going to Just One More Casino. And those are broken into 2 suites because they're tied to video lottery. So this did receive approval from the Community Development Department, and all notices and publications are done on those 2. And then when we look at D and E, these are a transfer of ownership, so no location change, just the ownership is changing. And these also have everything in line as far as publication and fees are paid. So if there's any specific questions, I can answer them.
Thank you very much. Chair will open up a public hearing on item B. Is there anyone who would like to testify on an application for a transfer from ABA Glines, doing business as Just One More Casino, to Just One More Casino? Yep. And anyone would like to testify on that? Hearing none, I'll close the public hearing, open it up to council action. Do I have a motion to approve this application? Motion made by Councilman Schutte, seconded by Councilman Vilhauer. Any questions or comments on this, council? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the transfer. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item C, I will open up a public hearing for a transfer of a retail malt beverage farm wine and video lottery license from Cloud9 Golf Course to to Just One More Casino. Open up a public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to testify on this item? I'll close the public hearing, open it up for council action. Do I have a motion to approve the transfer? Motion made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Paulson. Any questions or comments on this, council? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the transfer. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item D is a transfer of ownership from Tokyo to Hiro Sushi and Hibachi. I will open up a public hearing. Anyone would like to testify on this? I'll close the public hearing, open it up for council action. Do I have a motion to approve the transfer? Motion made by Councilman Beeler, seconded by Councilman Paulson. Any questions or comments on this? Question is to approve the transfer. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item E is a transfer of ownership from Tokyo to Hiro Sushi and Hibachi as well. So open up a public hearing. Anyone would like to testify on this? Close the public hearing, open it up for council action. A motion to transfer is now appropriate. Motion made by Councilman Beeler, seconded by Councilman Tupper. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, the motion is to approve. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item F is an approval of the reimbursement resolution number 23-04 for well field and cast iron main replacement. For this, we will actually go to Adam Karst from our Watertown Municipal Utilities Department for testimony.
There. Yes, thank you guys for your time. I'm here to answer any questions. This is for our third and fourth projects for the ARPA funding. As you remember, I was here a few months ago and asked for some approval for some documents. These are two other projects. It's a new well-filled project as well as the cast iron main replacement project. This is a little bit different as far as this is an intent to reimburse, so we're not ready to set the surcharges yet. The plan is we're going to do that this fall. We're going to spend some money in 23, but the majority of these funds will be spent in 24. So we're going to spend some of our own money, and then in order to be eligible for the loan, we want to be paid back. This is the procedure that we have to go through for the state. So these projects equate to, I think, 11.8 million, and there's a 30% grant, so and the loan is going to be 8.2, so that difference is the grant portion of the funds. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Chair will open up a motion to approve the reimbursement resolution. Motion made by Councilman Beeler, seconded by Councilman Schutte. Open it up for questions and comments, Council. Councilman Danforth.
Thank you, Mayor. Adam, just my understanding on this is that I think in the last utility meeting you said a question had been raised is why aren't you using your reserve funds for this? And you explained that very nicely, where we get, if we use our own funds, we don't get the grant. We also get more money for our money, your money, that's in the bank than what the interest rate is. So it makes sense doing what you're doing. The downside of that is you're required to then have, what, 110%? Can you explain that? And then with that, what that does is we're increasing rates because we have to, when we really got the reserves. Do you see where I'm coming from?
I see where you're coming from.
We're increasing rates because of the loan, not necessarily because we have to.
Yep.
Per se, right?
Yes, sir.
If you just take a minute and explain that.
All right, so we're going to receive the 11.8 million. As the total project cost is 11.8 million. It's really, we're only going to be able to, we can borrow only 8.2 million of that. So we're going to be getting a grant of 4.6 million. So we're going to borrow the money of 8.2 million at 1.875% for 30 years. Currently in the bank, I think we earn 3.5%. Higher than that, Kristen? So as far as a business decision, we're going to get 30% of it paid for. It's really going to not cost us any money if you look at the interest income coming in and the interest expense going out. We're going to improve our system, as well as we have an opportunity where we can pay that off later. Now, the reason for not setting the surcharges at this point is because we have another loan for the water treatment plant expansion that's $23 million that's coming due in 28. And I think, if I remember, Kristen did this similar, where I'm going to have a rate study and I'm going to look at, we've grown since 2007, so I'm going to look at that surcharge, and I think I can lower that surcharge on the existing debt and kind of offset some of the surcharge that is required for this new debt to have a less of an impact on our rate base. So I think I can do it for an inflationary cost, but that's something that I want to look at into a study this summer. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Any further? Finance Officer Bob Zine, did you have something to add?
Yeah. The only thing that I'll also add is because of the current climate right now with interest rates, that these are still good. They're still good. But we always do have that opportunity to refinance and watch as it progresses. So at any time, if we could save money, we do that. And to Adam's point too, as we watch the debt go down and if anything does change, we do have that ability to look at the surcharges that the customers are seeing to make sure the debt is there. So.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the reimbursement resolution. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item G is a first reading of Ordinance 23-01, an amendment to Section 1401 of the Revised Ordinances of Watertown regarding the creation of a Watertown Park and Recreation Advisory Board. Our City Manager, Amanda Mack, will lead this off.
Thank you, Mayor. You'll notice that this has been brought back as a first reading. We did have a first reading back in January. The reason for the second first reading is our city attorney, along with our community development manager and our public works director, have spent substantial time flushing out the parkland dedication language, which provided enough of the change in the proposed ordinance amendment that we felt a first reading was, again, appropriate. As a general reminder, what this ordinance does is take the current Park and Rec board and turn it into an official advisory board, much more in line with the city manager form of government.
Thank you very much. Any further comments? City Attorney Lisa Carrico.
Sure. With what I'm just going to call it the first reading, is after we had met in the beginning of January, you guys had some minor changes to what I'm going to call the crux of the ordinance of just changing the board to an advisory board. And those changes have been made. However, as City Manager Mack had indicated, there were some substantial questions about the parkland dedication, and we wanted it to comport with how we currently do things, and also give a little more guidance in the cash in lieu language. So with that, I would say, do you have any questions? Because there is a change. If you'll notice, we changed the cash in lieu language. So if it's just land base dedication to park, it's 5% of the total land base that's being annexed. However, with the cash in lieu, because we changed the price as to the assessed value within the city limits for developed residential property, meaning after annex, then if we did a 5%, like the old ordinance, the amount was way too much. It would discourage developers from even developing because of the amount of money they would have to pay for a cash in lieu and the amount of land that they were giving up. So after sitting down with the community development manager and the public works director and talking with the Department of Equalization office, we came up with a 1% of that value after it's been assessed value after it's been annexed. And if I could ask the community development manager to come up, because we actually put together an example so you kind of see it in application. And I'll let her lead off there.
Thank you, Lisa. Let me get this pulled up.
While she's pulling that up, I would also point out that in this ordinance, there can also be what we're calling a combination. So there could be a partial land dedication rather than a full 5%, as well as cash in lieu. So.
Yes. Even more. Is that helpful? So if you guys want further explanation, otherwise, I feel like Lisa did describe it well. Obviously, there's a lot of figures and numbers involved and percentages. So this is just our exhibit laying out, if somebody were to come in and develop a quarter section of land, which is 160 acres, to break that down so you guys could see what we currently have in ordinance and then what this amendment would be proposing. So right now, you would dedicate 5% of the total land area, and we're going to say that this entire quarter section is being developed as residential. So then that would require you to dedicate 8 acres. And if you did not dedicate 8 acres, say there's a nearby park where the park board does not choose to take the land and they go a cash in lieu route, under today's ordinance, we say the current property value or something similar to that, which ag land would be assessed at $2,426 per acre. And this is subject to change in different areas, but this was actually one of the most recent developments that we had. So then the total land, this number is a little irrelevant, but then if we would take the 5% park dedication under the county assessed value, then the developer would be required to pay $19,408, which is very much off the mark of what that property would be worth if it would be assessed at the annexed residential rate, which that would be 1.2 million. So that's why then Lisa had talked about how not asking that the developer, that it's a apples to apples cash in lieu or park dedication, but to come up with somewhere in the middle of, and then landing on 1% cash in lieu. Because, so if we went 1% of cash in lieu to meet the park dedication requirement, then the developer who has the quarter section of land would have to pay about $250,000. But that is more in mark with I guess, if somebody is required to give the land versus cash. If that helps, and I guess this figure down here might kind of clarify it a little more. So if somebody were to develop the 8 acres and then they were paying the cash in lieu, and if they could develop approximately 11,000 square foot lots, where if they sold them at $45,000 a piece, then they would make $1.35 million still off of that land, and then they would be required to give the city $250,000 as that cash in lieu. And then, but they would still be able to develop their property. So by going with the 5% amount, that's they're not going to be able to really recover from what they would have to give if we would have kept it 5%.
So the goal of adjusting that number, the cost of the fee in lieu of dedicating land, was to make it more equitable to what those land prices are worth after annexation. Today's fee in lieu, they're paying prices for pre-annexation land, ag land values. So we, as staff, felt it made more sense as a community to price that fee in lieu to the post-annexation in the city limits land value rather than the pre-annexation ag value, is essentially what we were trying to accomplish there. So Lisa and Brandy worked out, where those percentages should fall so that they're still reasonable, going against the 5% because it was just too high, and landing more on the 1%, which was more equitable to the land value post-annexation.
Thank you. This is a first reading, so it's more loose in the decorum. So Councilman Paulson, you have a question or a comment?
Thank you, Mayor. First, the comment, 2C should read a combination of 2A and 2B, not 3A and 3B.
Thank you.
Second, I do think we're still going to get a little kickback on the 1% of the annex residential rate. I know I talked to you both a little bit about it before. I think you'll still hear a little grumblings there because, honestly, development work there's really not in it. There's not as much profit as people think there is. So that's why I think you'll still see some kickback, but like I also mentioned to both of Lisa and Brandy, is that once we have the set policy in place that we actually follow for a long time, people start building it into their models that's a requirement. Whereas right now, I think it's been so kind of, I don't want to say loose because we've been following it for a while, but it's been at a very low rate. So everyone would fight for cash in lieu of instead of giving 8 acres. So now that I think that there's actually a set policy that hopefully we can follow going forward, where the Park and Rec Board will make a recommendation. Maybe they don't need 8 acres. Maybe they only want 2 for development, and then take the other whatever 6 acres of cash in lieu of. So.
Any further questions or comments? Councilman Bueller.
Thank you. Just my question is, if we took that 8 acres and we applied that value to that, would that be enough to purchase that property? If we wanted those 8 acres, I mean, just say we wanted to buy 8 acres, the 8 acres set aside, would that come close to, maybe what you're saying on the bottom there, you can construe it from that, but that's my question. Would we be able to buy that for that in developed property? In other words, it's zoned. It's not ag property anymore. It's zoned residential.
For the 250,000?
Yeah.
Well, good question. Because if the annex, I mean, it would be, I'm not sure if this is market, like this is the assessed value, so it's not really market value either. So we probably wouldn't be able to, I'm going to say.
We'd come up short. Would we not come up a little short? Okay.
Mm-hmm. But at least, because it's a dedication and we're not having to put money into developing the infrastructure. So, but then this way it stays more in mark with like what the land is worth versus what we were receiving for cash in lieu.
We didn't want to discourage development, but at the same time, we didn't want to have it be for chump change.
I think what you've done is really nice work. I think this is overdue. I think you've done a good job with this because there is that balance that we've got to have, without losing sight of the importance of our neighborhood parks.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Councilman Danforth.
When we do the park dedication, when we're actually talking about land, a number of times we have actually obtained land that's really more suitable for water runoff than it is parks. To me, and I understand, I guess, how we get there, but to me, parks are parks and runoff is runoff. Granted, sometimes they can share, but we've really taken on some really poor land at times. And I think that has to be really seriously considered when we're looking at this. Is runoff is one thing. Let's have an area that we can have good parks that we can be proud of. And it shouldn't be a detention pond or a creek in a lot of cases. So,
Councilman Bueller.
Thank you. To Mike's point, Mike, I think this is a perfect thing for that advisory board, for them to understand, and you've done a good job over time for sure of trying to explain this to everybody as in my tenure on the Park and Rec Board. But that is a perfect thing for them to look at and assess and make sure that we're doing the right thing.
Any further questions or comments? This is first reading, so we'll have this back probably at the next council meeting. So we'll move on to item H, an approval of professional services agreement for consulting services associated with commissioning the Ice Arena project with Questions and Solutions Engineering Incorporated. Go to our Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye, to explain this.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. As the construction of the ice arena has progressed, we continue to work in the background, behind the scenes, and keeping up with all the other things in the queue besides just the physical construction of the arena. This is one of those items where we're looking ahead to the point of when the ice arena is built. It's I'd say a not uncommon practice to hire a commissioning firm, and that's what this Questions and Solutions Engineering provides. And by commissioning is once the ice arena is complete, as they go through the facility with staff and with our consultants, and they go through each of the systems in the facility to make sure that they're operating as they're designed to, as they're the whole myriad of things get looked at, from settings to valve positions to the function of the units, whether it be the HVAC system. In this case, we have a pretty intricate ice cooling system in the floor. But this contract gets us that level of service to where the staff are comfortable with the operations. We are assured by this consultant that the operations are indeed set up optimally, And if there are any issues with the setup of any of the systems, we then communicate that back to the contractor and coordinate any solutions that have to be made on their end. This is within budget of the overall contract, a scope of work for the ice arena. This is one of those anticipated expenses that we've been waiting for a contract for, and is included in the overall budget for the ice arena. With that, I'll stand by with any questions.
Chair will entertain a motion to approve the agreement. Motion made by Councilman Vilhauer, seconded by Councilman Bueller. Open it up for questions and comments. Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to clarify what you just said, Heath. Okay, this is in the budget. I mean, I don't remember a line item as such. Is this part of the contingency amount, or I'm not clear when you say it's part of the budget. Explain that a little further.
It was included in the soft costs
In the
line item.
In the soft costs. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I guess my comment's kind of like that too. I mean, my question is, why are we paying this and not the general contractor? Because, I mean, we're paying for a facility that I feel like this is kind of like part of that project. So why was this not included in the general contractor's responsibility for making sure that everything's operational and startup operations are? Shouldn't we be able to turnkey this building? Essentially, is what I'm asking. Instead, we're adding these contracts that I feel like maybe we necessarily.
City Manager Mack. Or Public Works Director Von Eye.
Yes, thank you. I'd say that one of the primary reasons to go with a third party rather than having the contractor perform this work is just that reason, so that we have an objective third party going through these systems that's not working for the general contractor, but rather working for us on our behalf, so that they're not afraid to overturn any stone and call out any fault in the systems that may be there. The contractor is responsible to give us a complete project. This goes a step over and above that to where we're making sure these systems are fine-tuned and set the most optimally. We can reflect back to recent facilities in the past where we found years later that maybe systems weren't quite set up how we had hoped they would have been. Really at no fault of anybody's, but just inherent to the way that process was, the way that finished product was handed off to the city. In this scenario, it'll be handed off to the city in, I'd call a lot more optimal condition to where we have some confidence that the systems are set how they need to be.
Any follow-up, Paulson?
Yeah. And I understand that completely, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do this. I'm just asking the questions that are coming to my head here. But, you know, I would almost liken this as being a contractor side doing a road. We have to pay for the testing and everything up front, and then we hand it over to the city in an operational stance. And to me, this is a general contractor cost that they should have to give us the finished product. I'm just kind of spitballing here, but it just seems like a big expense for something that I don't think we should be paying for.
City Manager Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess the best explanation that I can give is the general contractor will turn over a completed facility to us. The HVAC contractor is going to install it to the appropriate specs, and someone's going to sign off on that, and here you go. What this does, and having come from a community where we built a facility with some pretty intricate systems, I wish we had done this, because we spent the entire first year in our new building trying to figure out the heating and cooling system because it had been overbuilt for the space that we had. So what they do is they go in, and it's not necessarily a check on the contractor's work, it is to some extent, but it's getting the system to work for exactly how we need it to work. And as we've learned with ICE, some of you probably knew this, I didn't because I had nothing to do with ICE before it came here. Those systems are incredibly finicky, they're incredibly important, and if we are not operating them the right way, it can cause substantially more costs than what we're going to pay to have them commission it. And just a reminder, when Dick was here last to give the last update, we did talk about this. It was not new to us that this was coming, and like I mentioned, it was part of the soft cost budget. So I don't know if that helps or not.
Councilman Beeler was first.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a few comments, questions. And does this take place during the install? For example, when they're putting the flooring in and the cooling system, do they assess this as it's being constructed, or are they looking at it after it's done? That's my first question.
The latter of the two, after everything's complete.
Okay, so they're looking at it post-construction, and then if there's an issue, then what? They identify an issue. Then what? They go to the contractor, hey, you got to fix this. So that's where they're at in the process?
Yeah, exactly. And I would echo what Manager Max cited, that although I stated that, they look at the contractor's work, that's kind of a subsidiary benefit of this contract. The primary function of this contract is to go through these systems and fine-tune them, make sure they're set up and operating optimally. And the last few pages of the council packet related to this in the attachment, you can see there's 2 to 3 dozen components that they go through in detail in reviewing the shop drawings that were submitted for those components, like the HVAC system or the ice cooling system. They review the shop drawings, they review the controls for all these systems and all the specifications related to them, and learn them to a level of detail to where they can coordinate everything and make sure that it's set optimally. That's the primary function. The subsidiary benefit is if we find something like there's projects of this magnitude where a valve gets installed backwards and it prevents the proper water flow and temperature going to a certain area of the building, things like that could be caught, where I've heard stories of other facilities where that's happened and has cost that facility a lot of issues, well over the tune of $80,000 worth of a contract to help prevent things like that from happening.
How did we identify this organization? Why did we pick them? Was it JLG recommendation or Dick Strasberg?
Our owner's rep, Tegra, brought these individuals forward to us as a service that they've seen very common on a complex structure like this.
And then my last question, if I might, Mayor, is there any type of warranty for them? Is there any warranty for the work they do if they miss something or if we have issues because of something they missed?
That I can't speak to off the top of my head on, I don't know, Justin's not quite sure based on his response either.
If we don't know, it's okay.
Yeah,
It's something you might want to, we may want to consider that, Thanks.
Councilman Tupper.
With this, I mean, like you say, it's a very integral system that they're working with. When they're going through that, are they also training our people on the proper way of operating that or not? Is there somewhat?
I believe that is a component of it, is to make sure that our people know the right levers to pull and buttons to push.
And where it needs to run at. Okay, thank you.
Can we make certain on that? Just be nice to ask and make certain, but yeah, thanks. Councilman Danforth.
Thank you, Mayor. Colin, I'm with you on this one. I'm struggling. I really am. I look and we pay architects an exorbitant fee to design the buildings. They contract with engineering firms to give us the specs for whatever it is, structure or electrical or plumbing or HVAC. We hire an owner's rep. We hire a contractor, a CMAR. And through all of that, at the end we go, we really don't trust any of you, aggregately. So let's pay another $81,000. And I'm all for validating. This seems really crazy to me. In business, I would really struggle with this. When I am paying $36 million or $34 million for a building, and then I got to have somebody who's not even a part of this come in for 81 grand, come in and validate what we've all paid for. I really struggle with that. If we don't have the resources in the architect and the engineers and our owner's rep and our CMAR, then we got a problem if we got to pay an extra $81,000, in my opinion. This just really shocks me. That's my 2 cents.
Councilman Shetty?
Thank you, Mayor. This may be splitting hairs, but it mentions here on the schedule that this proposal is based on construction being complete in December of 2023, which we all are planning on that and hoping for that. If for some reason it gets delayed a month or something happens, they potentially could they could adjust their contract price, or they could, or I mean, is there, if it gets delayed, will that affect the contract amount? Are we stuck with this, or do we go back to re-signing a new agreement? Just was curious if there's ever any delay in the contract schedule.
Yeah, go ahead.
Under the contract, they did not provide any contract language that said that they had the opportunity to revise their rates. So when I reviewed the agreement, I took it as more, this is how we came up with the figure. They also, in their schedule, and I can let Heath speak to that, is the hours involved for each thing. So basically, if they haven't done it, as long as it's not increasing the hours, there's no, I would tend to think the cost would remain the same. But it was a good question, because I did notice that in their cover and then looked for the language in the actual terms, and I didn't find anything where it basically said that they could amend their, for any elongating of the project. So, thank you.
Unless the council has a problem, I have a question. Would you like to add something first, Director Von Eye?
If I could, just to try to help talk through some of Councilman Danforth's comments there, I would, this is a silly comparison, but I would compare it to like having a home inspection on a property that you're buying. It's just one of those services that none of the other entities involved in that process do. Yeah, your realtor's not going to do that. The seller's not going to do it. The buyer's not going to do it. Your mortgage lender's not going to do it. You just have to hire the home inspector to go do that. So that's kind of how I would use it as an analogy for this service. Our architects, it's just not in their wheelhouse. The contractor, like I mentioned, they don't do it to the level that this gets done as far as helping us get these systems set up. So I don't know if that helps any or not, but there's a little bit of an analogy there I thought I'd throw out.
It's a good analogy and better than the one I used previously with the Vikings. But I do have a question, though. Is there any reason why this has to be approved tonight? Could it be postponed?
Yes. Assistant City Engineer Peterson just reminded me that although the focus of a lot of their work is at the end of the project, they do review the shop plans that are submitted throughout the project. So as far as that value-added engineering, when we're getting specifications and shop drawings submitted, they give each one of those a review as well on our behalf. So our architects looking at those and approving them, but these folks would also look at them from an operational standpoint as well. That was the main reason to get this approved as soon as we could, because those shop drawings are starting to be submitted and have already been submitted.
So I guess I would echo the concerns that I heard previously, which is we all hope that the arena is finished on time, but if it is not, then how can we have an agreement to come in after the fact to investigate it to make sure it was built to spec if this contract is already ended? And I know that that's legalese, and that would be great if that was answered without any question about that. But Councilman Vilhauer.
I guess I'll just make the comment that I realize 81,000 is 81,000. We're not talking loose change here. But through this process, we have, and this is coming from our owner's rep as a recommendation to us, right?
Correct.
I mean, Dick is recommending this. I mean, he has given us good advice throughout this entire process. This expenditure in a $36 million project is about a little over 2.2% of the cost. I think to me it's relatively cheap insurance. Yes, should somebody else maybe have done this as part of their services, but by the same token, I don't want to shortchange us now in the home stretch as we're building this thing. So I guess I would support this.
Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I also will support this because I do agree, Councilman Vilhauer, at that point. But I mean, going forward, I just wanted you guys to be aware. Like, I do have concerns when we see contract after contract for added this, added that, added this. I mean, that's going to start adding up at the end. We're already on a tight budget. We've already, had to do another $10 million sales tax bond, and I just have my worries. I mean, this is obviously a small insurance policy, like Councilman Vilhauer said, but we just need to be cautious going forward, because this is something, like I've said before, that I do think this should have been a cost by someone else, not the owner. Or it should have been bid as, it should have been included, is all I'm saying.
City manager
just to
back
clarify,
up.
it is part of the project, but soft costs are not run by the CMAR. Those are the responsibility of the owner, which is us. So I just want to be clear, like, this is part of the project. It was identified when they were putting the project budget together. If there's something that we can do differently as staff to get that information out to you sooner, we certainly will do that. But this does not put us at a point at the end of the project where we're going to have to come up with an additional $80,000. It's being tracked along with the construction costs, along with all of the other things that are going into this project. So I just want to be clear on that. This was an intended expense of this project.
Thank you. Councilman Danforth.
No, well, here's my frustration. We hire architects, and when something goes wrong, we pay for it. They don't pay for it, we pay for it. So if something doesn't work within the engineering that they contracted to get a building built for us, and it doesn't work like it's supposed to, we pay for it. Nobody accepts responsibility for the end result of their product, other than the fact that it stands up, I guess, right? But when there's a problem, we're the ones that pay for it continually. So now we're going to spend $82,000, $81,000. So if something goes wrong after they've done this, are they just pointing to us and going, well, you need to replace a $50,000 compressor, or whatever the number is, or whatever the item is? Is that where we're at on this? Is that we're going to hold the bag anyway in the end? And I know what you're saying is we're hopefully reducing the probability of holding the bag, but that's where we find ourselves every time. So what surety do we have that they're going to do their job right, and that we've added value to this other than spending $81,000? I just struggle with it, and I know how to make ice in my refrigerator. Beyond that, that's it. But I'm struggling with the fact that all of these professionals, and Heath, you and I had a little bit of a comment earlier today on a topic about trusting the engineers, right? Well, here we are, right? We don't trust them, so now we're going to hire another one to come in, dot the I, cross the T, and hopefully catch something for us or make sure it's right. I'm struggling with that. So my question is, what liability do they have if something goes wrong that they didn't catch?
City Manager Mack.
Thank you, Mayor. So a couple of comments on that. If items don't work, things come up, if they're within the warranty period of the project, which however we establish that, the project overall or different components of the project, we can file a warranty claim. And that's how we recoup any expenses that are related to that. That protects us. This is not about not trusting the contractors or the engineers or the architects. This is about teaching us how to use the systems that we're spending millions of dollars to install, and to make sure that once they are installed, they're working the way that we need them to work in order to operate the ice arena at the level that we say we want to operate it at. That's really what this is about. It's not because we don't trust that the contractor is going to put it in correctly. Now, they may find some things during this commissioning that something was wrong, so it's just an added benefit. But we do have a warranty period on the components, on the project. And that's the best explanation that I can give.
Any further questions or comments? Councilman Shetty.
Just one more quick question for Councilman Danforth. I'd like to know how you make ice in a refrigerator, not a freezer.
Oh,
It's the new technology, Dan.
Councilman Shetty, you have my permission to pick up your microphone and drop it. Any further questions or comments?
I could see if QSA will send Councilman Danforth a proposal too.
Mayor, I'd like to have a new seat assignment.
Thank you, Councilman Danforth. Chair will ask ahead of time, is there anyone who would prefer this to be called as a roll call vote? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the agreement. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item I is an approval of a professional services agreement with Infrastructure Management Services for work associated with the bike trail inventory and assessment. For more information, we'll go to our Public Works Director, Heath Von Eye.
Thank you, Mayor. This item was brought forth after previous discussions related to our city's bike trail system. As the council's full well aware, we have what's called a pavement management program that has analyzed every street within the city that we perform maintenance and reconstruction on. That pavement management program was performed by IMS, Infrastructure Management Services. They do pavement management studies here in the upper Midwest, and we've retained them in 2017 and then again in 2021. So what we've done is approach them to give us a contract to perform the same services on our bike paths. I believe several council members have expressed interest in seeing something like this put together for our bike trail system, so we could have a good comprehensive assessment on and a rating of the condition of our bike path system throughout the city, which then helps staff prioritize any maintenance efforts that we put into those bike trail systems, whether it be surface maintenance, rehabilitation, or even full reconstruct. So this contract with IMS is just shy of $30,000. It'd be paid for out of the 212 fund, which there's adequate funding for, and some of the park and rec components there in the 212 fund. And Assistant City Engineer Peterson has done a lot of legwork on this with the Park and Rec Director, Dusty Roddick, who's not here tonight. But Justin and I could stand by for any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Chair will entertain a motion to approve the agreement. Motion made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Paulson. Any further questions or comments? Councilman Vilhauer.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a question. Heath, how much did we pay for the pavement management study in 2021 for the streets? $120,000. Okay. It just struck, I didn't realize it was quite that much. It just struck me as being high relative to what I thought we had paid for 20, but it was more now than I thought it was, so objection removed.
Any further questions or comments? Councilman Beeler.
This question for you, Heath. What do you foresee? I mean, I'm looking at what the activity list is, but what do you foresee them doing? They're going to ride this path. They're going to collect data. What are they looking for? I mean, they're looking for, obviously, you can see the cracks. You can see where there's fill. I mean, you can see where it's sunk out or broke up. What else are they looking for?
So, when you talk about pavement management and when you perform pavement assessments, they're trying to build a pavement condition index, just like they do for our city streets. That PCI then is what's essentially used to rate the street. And how they create the pavement condition index is by assessing any of the distresses, some of which you just mentioned, Councilman Bueller. It could be raveling, it could be excessive cracking, it could be potholing, it could be differential settlement in slabs if it's concrete, for instance. All those kind of things that they have, there's a whole litany of those kind of distresses that they track. And then the degree of those distresses that they observe is how that pavement condition index gets formulated. So if you have a half-mile segment that's consistently got random cracking that's very excessive, that goes into that weight of how that pavement condition index is created. So it's the surface distresses, it's the blemishes, the faults, all the things in the pavement surface that they're looking at that is used to build that pavement condition index.
Councilman Tupper.
Public Works Director Brown Eye. So when they do this, they put everything into their inventory system just like they did with our streets. This will actually help you determine, you know, just because you see cracks doesn't mean that it's a bad pavement. This will help you determine what level or, you know, where you got to go first to start repairing. You'll tell you whether or not to repair, replace.
Correct.
And what degree?
Correct. It'll prioritize the locations to work based on their condition, and it also provides recommended surface treatments or full reconstruct based on the conditions, just like our street pavement management program does.
Yeah, a lot of times it doesn't take a total reconstruct where it could be done in a mill and overlay or condition like that, or maybe even a crack seal. So
exactly.
Makes us be more efficient on where we're spending our dollars, put it that way. So
It does, and if you remember from the street side of things, where they target where the average condition is at right now, it also gives us budgetary guardrails on, you know, if you put X dollars in per year, you'll see the condition exponentially grow over the next 5 to 10 years, which is another benefit of this study as well.
how often do you foresee them coming back and redoing the study? I mean, did they redo the streets once they did it the first time?
Yeah, the streets we try to do every 4 to 5 years, just because of the use that they get. Now, a bike path pavement management system, I'm guessing that could go out a little bit further.
Probably 5 to 10.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Councilman Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. To Councilman Villauer's point, I'm not worried about, I guess, necessarily the cost, but we could potentially save costs in the future if we did this with the road IMS, or is this completely separate because of the way they map it?
If I understand your question correctly, Councilman Paulson, this would be a completely separate function that they'd perform outside of any street work, any street assessment. Was that your question?
Well, kind of, but could we save on mobilization essentially if we were to do them at the same time?
I doubt it because the equipment's different. I think
yeah,
they'd still have to remobilize the unique equipment for the pathways versus what they're using on the roadways.
Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the agreement. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Item J is an authorization for the city manager to sign a letter of recommendation to the Federal Department of Transportation for approval of Denver Air Connections Proposal Option 3 for the Watertown Essential Air Service contract. City Manager Mack, you were referenced in the agenda item, so please tell us.
Thank you, Mayor. As you all are aware, the airport board met 2 weeks ago now, I believe it was, to review the options that were presented to us by Denver Air Connection in relation to their bid to provide essential air services to the city of Watertown. The board is bringing you a recommendation for option 3, which would be to maintain the status quo. So it would maintain flights to Chicago and Denver. And with that, it would authorize myself to sign the letter of recommendation and submit it to the DOT. We're hopeful that they would approve that recommendation, but ultimately that decision lies with the DOT. And with that, myself or Heath or Rob or Jerry can answer any questions you might have.
Our airport manager, Rob Cyrus, is back there. Would you like to add anything, or nope? Just here for questions. And Airport Board of Directors Director, Jerry River, is here as well. So Chair will entertain a motion to approve the letter of recommendation. Motion made by Councilman Villauer, seconded by Councilman Paulson. Open it up for questions and comments. Councilman Danforth?
When do we hear the results of this?
Your guess is as good as ours. Before the end of the contract on June 30th, so before July 1st.
No, just come on forward and use the microphones.
Let's try, guys.
Yeah.
If I could,
We're going to get you on camera, guys.
If I could, Mayor, I believe Airport Board member Mike Tomlinson is still online with us too tonight. I just want to give him some credit for hanging in throughout the meeting in case we had any questions for him as well.
Thank you, Mr. Tomlinson.
The last few bid cycles we've done, it's been about 60 days before the end of the contract is where they release. So it could be, they'd given us some time to make this decision. We're giving it to them earlier than they'd authorized us. So, you know, they have to take it back, and so I would expect to see it sometime end of March, first part of April.
Councilman Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any concerns that they won't follow our recommendation? I know they didn't in the past, but that was also contentious. I'm guessing this one's not nearly as contentious as the last one, but are there any concerns that they might go a different direction?
The only concern I would say was that the Minneapolis is the cheapest bid. That's the only concern I would say.
The difference, if I may, Mayor, the difference in price from Minneapolis option to this option is about $800,000. So that was one of the concerns or setbacks with going with this option. But we still, and I've got a whole litany of pros and cons if the council wants to hear some more of them here in the discussion. But that was one of the concerns with this option.
Mr. Tomlinson, I see your signal wavering. Would you like to add anything?
No, Mayor Helene, I was just unmuting my microphone in case it was needed.
Thank you. You can play the guitar in the background while we make our decision.
Great.
Councilman Beeler. Questions, comments, council? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the city, to allow the city manager to sign the letter of recommendation. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. We are back. Yes, thank you for sticking with us. We are back to item H from the consent agenda, which is now item K on the regular agenda, which is an approval of a bid award for a 623 Caterpillar scraper to Butler Machinery in the Sourcewell bid in the amount of $1 million roughly. $1 million. Our city manager, Mac, will tell us why we want to spend that much money.
I will sure try. This is a planned purchase out of the landfill. The cost, is just a little over $1 million, which is about $40,000 less than was budgeted. It's based on the Sourcewell bid. We are replacing a 1996 scraper, so it has outlived its useful life. And with that, Heath or Justin could answer any additional questions you might have.
Chair will entertain a motion to approve the bid award. Motion made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Paulson. Open it up for questions and comments. Councilman Tupper.
So I see here they originally evidently bid a 615 Caterpillar scraper that's been discontinued, replaced with the 623. I take it that does meet all the specs that the 615 and probably a little bit more.
Yeah, the 623 is the newer model that's available through the Sourcewell bid and meets all the functionality that we would need to have at the landfill as far as their operations are concerned.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions or comments? Hearing none, the motion is to approve the bid award. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Is there any old business? Councilman Paulson.
Sorry, I've been kind of talkative, I guess, this meeting, but I apologize, unlike Mike. No, I'm just kidding. I have gotten a few comments on GovTV or our local channel that our meetings are not up to date. And I know that I just bring it up as old business because I know it's been mentioned numerous times, but there are citizens that like to watch it, is what I've been told. And I applaud them for that because sometimes it does get boring, but I'm glad they do as well. But yeah, they voice their displeasure in not being able to watch a current meeting. So if we could maybe push on that a little bit, I agree with Councilman Bueller on that. So.
In fact, I will say, Councilman Paulson, tonight, I mean, there was a little situation with the Facebook Live broadcast, and I say our IT department does a great job, and we'll just task them to stay on it. But I understand what you're saying. In fact, not long ago, I went back to watch an old meeting to just verify what was said, and I couldn't find it. So, Councilman Danforth?
This is old for about an hour and a half or 2 hours ago when we talked about the R3 rezoning, but I would like, I think we have some issues in our current zoning, whether it's R2 or R3, whichever we want to define it. I think we have an opportunity at least to take a look at what was requested and how we can better respond to that ordinance-wise. I think when we go from R2 to R3, we jump from a maximum, and that's with a conditional use of 4 units, so a fourplex, up to unlimited. We jump from 25-foot max or 35-foot up to 55-foot. So we go from a nice transitional movement up to no holds barred. I would like to see us at least look at it and see if there is merit in some changes in some manner to the zoning, whether that's R2, R3, some combination, whatever. But whether that is done in a committee or a work session, whatever, I think we need to do that. I think there's some merit there.
Councilman Tupper?
Excuse me, I'll have to agree with Councilman Danforth. If there was some transitional there, I don't think anybody enjoyed themselves tonight during that first part of that meeting. It was not a very good thing to have to make a decision on, and I think that could have been handled with some different, whether it's an R2B or something like that, to where you still have some regulations there, but it kind of loosens those R2 regulations, I think. Because I think it could have been a very good development, and I think everybody was willing to work together a little bit, but like I say, it just wasn't a fun time, and no matter who loses out but the city of Watertown. I mean, however you look at it, on one side or the other of the coin, but if we were to develop some step up from that R2 to R3, I think that'd be very, very, very good. So,
Councilman, I know City Manager Mack, I will give the microphone to her, but City Manager Mack and I were talking about this, and we were serious about this, to ask about residential 2 and an additional zoning thing, but we did come up with a residential 2 designation 2, so R2D2 would be the rezone possibility, but City Manager, but there has been discussion about this. City Manager Mack?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, that was secret discussion about R2D2. Just so you all are aware of the process, the process to amend the zoning ordinance, if it is not initiated by the Plan Commission, needs to be taken to them for consideration. So this body cannot just unilaterally make changes to the zoning ordinance. If you'd like to have this as a topic of discussion for a future work session, we can certainly do that. And then it would be a recommendation to the Plan Commission, and they can either take the action up and vote up or down on any proposed changes, or they can decide not to take the action up. That's just the process for how to amend the zoning code.
Councilman Paulson had a comment.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I guess my only comment is, so this was one situation. Have we ran into previous situations where a whole zoning group would, I mean, outside of this one situation, would we need it outside of that? That's my question. I understand completely where you're coming from, Councilman Danforth, but I mean, it seems like a special situation to me where I don't know if a whole nother grouping makes sense, but that's outside.
Mayor, if I might.
Councilman Beeler?
Just a comment. We have done this before, but this was back when Mike and I were on planning. We came up with R2A, and that was because we had a lot of narrow lots, and they couldn't put this in or that in, and couldn't expand their, buildings and that kind of thing. So we had it all over town, and those types of incidents. I don't know that this is something that we would need very often, but in a situation maybe like tonight, something like tonight, it might be beneficial. It certainly couldn't hurt to have it on the books, and it would protect us from that huge gap between R3, and if you had an R3A that goes from 5 miles an hour to 300 miles an hour. That's the only thing it might be worth at least just taking a look at,
Councilman Shetty?
Thank you, Mayor. I would agree this is worth looking at, based off tonight, but just as we grow as a community, just to have another tool in the tool belt to help navigate through some of these scenarios. So it's worth evaluating.
Any further old business? Any new business? Any liaison member reports? Any announcements? Next meeting will be our work session, City Manager Meck?
Correct. We do have a work session scheduled for the 13th, and then the next council meeting will be on the 21st because the 20th is a holiday.
Yes. Any further announcements? Councilman Vilhauer?
I see our Public Works Director just stepped out, but I was going to ask, several of us attended, as did Manager Mack, the Army Corps of Engineer discussion last week concerning, flood control issues up north. Anyone, I guess I'm looking at you, Manager Mack, any comment about that meeting?
It was well attended. We were very pleased with the turnout. This is the first step, really, in gauging public sentiment, sharing ideas. The Corps will take that information and continue to do their due diligence. They have some other agencies that they'll be working with over the next several months, and we will continue to keep you apprised of that process as it moves along.
And I actually will add something. I stuck around after the meeting and talked with most of the people who spoke up strongly against what they thought was being discussed that night. And I will say, they just assumed that we had already made up our mind and that the Army Corps of Engineers had already made up their mind and that we were going to try to ram an old proposal through without even considering any options, and that is as far from the truth as I can possibly stress. We as a council were unanimous when we first talked with the Army Corps of Engineers that we did not want to even take one step down this road with them if all we were going to do is get a finished product from them that recommended the same old course that we have gone down repeatedly in Watertown. That is not the council's desire. I want everyone in Watertown and in the concerning land north of Watertown especially to know that that is exactly what the council is doing. So please don't assume that we're trying to do what past councils have done, looking back well over, we're talking over 2 decades ago. That is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to come up with a solution. A solution is going to be something that has not already failed. I want to make that clear. So we don't know what the finished product is going to be, but we also owe it to the citizens of Watertown and the citizens who live north of us to come up with a proposal that could solve this issue, because it will continue to haunt Watertown. That's our attitude. I just want to make that very clear. Thank you, Councilman Villauer, for stressing that. Any further announcements? Councilman Wheeler?
Just a comment too, and you know, I attended that meeting as well, and you know, one of the things that I saw right away were people, like, there was a knee-jerk reaction to this is going to happen. Well, at this point in time, it's just, we need to make sure that people are clear on the fact we're just looking for ways to mitigate these issues. Right now, we're in the process of just trying to figure out different methods or ways that we can take care of flooding issues that could occur down the road. So that's important for the public to recognize.
Councilman Villauer?
If I'm not mistaken, wasn't it not until the end of next year that any kind of recommendation would be coming forth from their study? I believe it was a timeline that they had laid out last week.
Any further announcements?
I would just comment that the recording of that session is on the city's Facebook page if anyone wants to watch it or you were unable to be there.
Yes. I want to thank everyone in the council, everyone in the audience, everyone watching to forgive me the use of the sunglasses. I did not mean any sign of disrespect. It was more just to keep my head about me. Hopefully I succeeded. I will not make this a habit. There is no reason to go into executive session tonight. With that, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion made by Councilman Tupper, seconded by Councilman Villauer. Any discussion on that? Hearing none, the motion is to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Good night and God bless you, Watertown.